Hey, today I'm talking about 3 foreign films that are all under 80 minutes. Why did I watch 3 short films? Well, it's because it was Memorial Day weekend and I didn't have time for shit. The names of the 3 movies I'm talking about today are Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes, Happiness, and Lake of the Dead. First up is Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes. This is a Japanese movie from 2020 and it is amazing. It's kind of a time travel time loop movie. Basically, this guy who owns a cafe and lives above the cafe discovers that his computer monitor is connected to the security camera downstairs, but there's a 2-minute time delay. And by 2-minute time delay, I mean that upstairs is one point in time and then downstairs is the future. So you can have conversations with the future. This movie's also done in what is essentially one long take, but even with the cutting, it was still really impressive however the hell they did this movie. Like, I legit don't know how they filmed so many of these things. But yeah, this movie is great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a very, very smart script, filmed very impressively, and like, it just really works. If I was gonna complain about anything, I would say I feel like there's kind of too many characters. I feel like there's redundant characters that don't really add a ton to the movie. I thankfully didn't have any problems like telling anyone apart. They did a good job with that. But it's just, I don't know, the characters don't have a lot of depth to them, which is fine. I feel like with less characters they could have potentially had more depth. And then my other complaint would kind of be that like, we basically see both sides of the same conversation happening again and again. And as you can imagine, that gets kind of repetitive. Like, they explained the premise of this movie 3 times. And I'm like, I got it with the first one. And I get that I'm a nerd and I like sci-fi stuff, but like 3 was just kind of a lot. And I get that other people definitely need the 3 explanations and could watch this film and still don't understand it. But I don't know. It is what it is. I still enjoy this movie a lot and I would definitely recommend it. You do have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, especially in regards to like cable management. It is a bit silly, but it's just a silly, fun little movie. It's great. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved it a lot. Definitely recommend it. Next up is Happiness. This is a 1960s French film that's really interesting. In order to talk about this movie, I have to spoil this movie because there's not a lot of plot that happens. But the plot that happens is interesting, but not interesting enough that I would recommend watching it. I did enjoy this movie. I put it in the quite liked. So the basic premise is this 27-year-old man who's happily married to the actor's real-life wife and has 2 kids that are his actual children. He's enjoying life. He likes life. Life is good. Then one day he comes across this beautiful woman and he's like, hey, I can make my life even more happy if I have sex with her. And then he does. And he's happy. And his wife is happy that he's really happy. And his mistress is happy that he's happy and also a little jealous of his regular life, but also doesn't super mind being the mistress. And then one day he decides to tell his wife about the mistress. And at first she's like, oh. But then she's like, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, that was weird. And then they have sex. And I was like, okay, interesting. And then she kills herself. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's more of what I was expecting. But then what I didn't expect was the ending of this movie where like, he's fine. He's happy. Now the mistress gets to be the mom to the kids and it's happily ever after. And I'm like, that was a bold choice for an ending. Because like, his affair is the reason this woman killed herself. And he's just like, yeah, I like this. Life is good. What? He was also really on board for having both a wife and a mistress. Because he even made a point of like, has anything been taken away from you since I've had this mistress? Have I done anything worse to you? Has your life been any worse? And she's like, no. He's like, see, my logic is flawless. I can totally have a mistress and still be happily married. It's great, right? Yes. And I'm like, you're crazy, man. His wife wasn't happy about it. This movie's interesting. If you're like, this movie sounds weird, those most French people are weird. Don't worry, the French also thought this movie was weird and were not happy about it. I'm not happy about it. It just is a really interesting concept that's really crazy. I wish I could recommend this movie though. It's just kind of really boring. Like, it's 70 some odd minutes long, but like, it's way too long. There's way too many shots of just like people existing, being happy. It's like, hey, we're a happy family in a park. Isn't this nice? And I'm like, not really, it's kind of boring. And then it cuts to them in the wilderness being a happy little family together. And they're like, isn't this nice? And I'm like, no, it's kind of boring. And then it cuts to something else that's kind of boring. So yeah, it was gonna be in the liked for most of the movie because of how bored I was, but the ending was super ballsy. So I was like, all right, you get bumped up for a crazy ass ending. Good job, movie. And lastly is Lake of the Dead. This is a 1950s Norwegian movie. The basic premise is there's a group of adults go to this cabin in the woods where they're supposed to meet up with one of the characters' twin brother, but he's not there. And also there's like a local curse that this place is haunted, and then spooky stuff keeps happening. And this movie does what I love good horror to do, and it makes it so it's not clear whether or not stuff is actually supernatural spooky or if it's actually just real life crazy shit. And what's so fascinating about this movie is that's basically what the whole thing is about. Is about debating whether or not this crazy shit is real or not, and specifically what the actual explanation for everything is. And that was great. I also think this movie had some really cool visuals, like especially for 50s. They did spooky stuff pretty well. My main issues with the movie are more so, firstly, I got so sleepy. Like, there's just something about the characters' voices that just like soothed me to sleep. And like, I did everything I could to not get sleepy. Like, I stopped to take a little nap, come back, thought I was fine. Nope, still sleepy again. Nothing I did helped me stay awake for this movie. That was really frustrating because I was really intrigued by what was going on and I liked the debate. I thought that was so fascinating. My other complaint, I think there's just too many characters. They do have two women characters in the movie, which I liked a lot. I especially liked that the one was a badass, brave person and her husband was like a little coward, except for one scene where he was really brave, and I'm like, that's really out of character for him. He should have woken his wife to go to the brave thing, but he didn't, and that was dumb, but whatever. And then there's like a bunch of male characters doing all the debating and stuff, and I like that all of them had very different viewpoints, but I think they easily could have taken away two of those male characters and just had the two women make the same arguments that those guys did, and it would have given more depth to them and just more depth in general to characters, and I think it would have worked a lot better. I did still enjoy this movie a good solid amount, even though I was sleepy. So I would recommend it if you think you can stay awake for it. Like, maybe have like a cup of coffee or 5 while watching this movie, and then you could probably get through it. Because it's definitely interesting and worth a watch. It's just sleep-inducing, which is really unfortunate. Alrighty, now for today's rankings. First up, we got Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes, here number 24 in the really like section. And then after that, we got Happiness, here number 66 in the quite like section. And then not too terribly far behind, bringing up the rear, is Lake of the Dead, sitting at number 81 in the liked section. And this is out of a total of 126 old movies so far this year.